So Jamil, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm joined by Jamil Abdullayev, head of Global Total Rewards for Pasha. And it's good to talk today about employee value proposition. So first of all, welcome. Maybe it's good for everybody who's listening if you introduce yourself to the people listening to us.
Absolutely happy to do so. So I'm the group head of rewards, which means that my job is to manage C-level compensation across the group. I also oversee the reward philosophy. And one of the things that we're working on is actually employee value proposition.
Right.
So that's something that is very important. Of course, it's a topic that goes beyond compensation, but it's also something that we're focused on both for our financial and non-financial companies within Pasha Group.
Right. So the question that comes up in my mind is like, how does an employee value proposition thinking and us doing more work on it, that's why we're also discussing it today, actually increases the effectiveness of your role as Total Reward? So how does it fit in?
Well, that's a great question. I think increasingly employees are focused on the rewards in a holistic way beyond compensation. My background, of course, is compensation. So I know very well that that's important, but I also understand that there are limits to what you can achieve through compensation alone. And the employee value proposition is critical for us to address those broader elements of employee engagement, retention, motivation that can really help drive improved employee performance. And we know that this works. This is not a new concept. So, Gartner, a global research and advisory firm, their studies show that actually effectively implementing employee value proposition lowers turnover by approximately 70% and increases new hire commitment by 30%. So there's a real tangible business benefit to getting this right. And of course, we want to deliver this for Pasha.
Wow. So it's really impactful for us in your field, but actually for our total field in our people philosophy execution. But before we go there, before we go into the depth of the application of employee value proposition, maybe we should talk about what it really is. So can you explain to us what is an employee value proposition?
Well, at its core, it's your promise as an employer to your employees. And if we think about the kind of traditional employer-employee relationship that maybe was more relevant in the past, employee does their job, they get compensated for it, they get paid for it, salary, bonus, etc. I think the notion of employee value proposition is broader than that. So it's really everything that you offer to your employees. And that, of course, includes compensation, but it's also your purpose. It's also your culture. It's also your leadership, your career progression opportunity, learning and development, and so much more. So that's really the full package that you as an employer are able to offer to current, but also to prospective employees. So it's really all about your employer brand. And if you think about, companies that have done this for many years, so those like Silicon Valley companies, you imagine when you think of working for Google, for example. Now, most of us have not worked for Google, but we immediately can picture a certain type of office, a certain type of job, and maybe excitement that comes with working for Google. So organizations that get this right, that it really has a very powerful impact on their employer brand and on their ability to attract, retain, and motivate the best talent.
Yeah, so that reminds me of there's a lot of work Google, etc. did on this, right? And one of their projects was Project Oxygen, which they delivered a lot of data out of their employees about the ways of working, etc. And the effect of certain policies and guidelines, whatever they offer to their employees. And one of the stats that I still remember from that Project Oxygen was that people tend to join Google and left in the first year, to a big proportion. Do you think that's also, there's a correlation between the promise as a company, people joining and then leaving? Is there a correlation to that, you think?
Yes, of course, because it's not just about making the promise, it's also living up to that promise and making sure that you deliver on what you have promised to your employees. And this is why it's, of course, it's important to articulate your EVP, but it's also important to live up to it. And I guess the key here is to recognize that EVP is not a fixed project. It's not something that you just do and then you stop. It's a living, breathing thing that requires two-way engagement with your employees. And your employee needs may change. I mean, I think maybe the best example of that recently was with COVID, and the number of remote working opportunities increasing and employees increasingly valuing that flexibility that remote working provides. That was really a big example of a change in employee needs and employee behaviors. And these things happen all the time. So once you have articulated and implemented your EVP, it's not enough to just leave it at that. You have to constantly monitor it, how you're living up to that EVP, but also making sure that you're getting the right signals from your employees so you're able to respond to their needs in a timely way.
And is there a specific way to do that? Because to keep it alive seems like an elaborate job to do, like difficult. Like, would you recommend like once every year, once every 6 months, once every 2 years to revitalize or rethink your EVP as a company?
Yeah, I think generally it's best practice to do that periodically. That can be, of course, it can mean different things for businesses at different stages of maturity. If you're a young company, you're growing very quickly. Chances are your headcount is expanding. Your maybe like the profile of the people that you're attracting changes quickly. You may need more frequent reviews than if you're a more established company with a relatively low turnover. But this is where I think the diversity of Pasha Group businesses really comes in also.
Plays in, right?
Of course. So if you're building EVP for a very wide and diverse group as we are, you need to make sure that you're getting the right kind of employee engagement and feedback. There are different ways of doing that. Traditionally it's done through survey methods. You could also get all kinds of informal qualitative feedback. But there are also other related data points. So like KPIs, kind of HR data that can really highlight how well you have implemented your EVP. Things like turnover, and you mentioned attrition in first year of hire, all kinds of sustainable engagement scores, etc. So there are really a range of metrics that you can use to assess the effectiveness of
your EVP. And how is it then related to sort of the country here, Azerbaijan, right? But also Turkey, Georgia, countries where we operate. Do you think we do enough of it? Because it sounds like that's the topic I think I want to get into, right? Because it sounds super exciting what you're talking about, and it seems really, really relevant for I think every company. My thinking is that we don't do enough of it here. How do you respond to that? Do you think we do enough of it here, or are we just at the early stage of developing this?
I think that's a fair assessment. We're at very early stage. I think generally the concept of EVP is not very well known and well defined in our market, and probably in other markets that we operate in as well. So there's a bit of catching up to do in terms of our business leaders, but also to explain to our employees what this really is and why this is meaningful and can make a real tangible impact, have a tangible impact for our businesses. So there is a bit of catching up.
But why is it? Like, I mean, because indeed it's like, I mean, there's a lot of super well-developed best practices in Azerbaijan, in Turkey as well, Georgia as well. And it seems super relevant for all of our companies, right? But it also seems relevant to many of the companies in Azerbaijan. I think we sometimes underestimate our value and our power that we have, and that I often mention that please visit Azerbaijan because there's quite a lot of best practices here. But EVP then sounds like an opportunity for us, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And I think that's changing. I think increasingly we're seeing not just Pasha, but other big market players recognizing that this is important. This is an opportunity to really differentiate themselves in the market and establish that first mover advantage. I think traditionally our market has, employers in our market have focused on addressing those functional needs of employees first. So things like compensation, of course, job title, etc. We increasingly know that that's not enough. Those are being seen as hygiene factors. They're important to be able to attract people and retain people, but they're not sufficient on their own to really engage people and drive top performance. So you need a more holistic package than that. And this is where EVP can be really powerful.
Do you see a role for purpose in EVPs going forward? And I mention this because we realize in a multi-generation workforce, we tend to see that younger generations are more inclined to view purpose as key for entry into companies and selection of companies they want to work for, they aspire to work for. So do you see things like that, like these more holistic reasons why I should join a company because of the why of a company play a bigger role in EVPs going forward?
I think that's definitely a big and increasingly a factor for younger generation. We know that for younger people, compensation is an important factor, like for all generations, but they're also more purpose-led than maybe the generations before them. At Pasha, we've launched our group-wide purpose last year, and we know that we're a purpose-driven organization. That's something that's very important to us. But there is also making sure that we can tie in effectively EVP to purpose. And there are examples of that, like Unilever, for example, is a very strong on purpose, has been a purpose-driven organization for many years. And they've really embedded that into how they treat their employees and how they articulate their EVP, and it has a profound impact on their business.
And if companies want to start with EVP, for instance, like we started our EVP ambition, well, we thought about it last year already. We really materialized it this year. So we're working on EVPs for all of our companies, but also Pasha Group large. But do you have a recommendation for chief HR officers in the country and basically all the listeners to this interview on how to start with an EVP process?
I think two points here I would highlight. First is listen to your employees. So it's really important. We see a lot of surveys, a lot of data coming in, and sometimes it's easy to get lost in all of this volume of feedback that you're getting. But it's really important to listen to your employees and really understand what their needs are. That's a starting point to any, I think HR leader's job, but of course it's relevant to EVP. And secondly, I think the name of the game is flexibility. So the more flexibility we can offer our employees in terms of compensation, benefits, how they work, how they develop their careers, the more I think engaged and productive our workforce will be. So those two themes I think are at the heart of delivering a successful EVP.
What I love about what you said is that it's often a process from start this project, use this process, work with this vendor, use this methodology, etc. But how you started, and particularly it shows how broad you think as a total rewards leader, that you start by saying, listen to your employees. I think that's exemplary for the types of roles we all need to play, being broad thinkers, and not only think from our job scope in particular, but keep looking at the starting point of how we protect the interests of all the employees in our environment, which is starting to talk to them, right? So I really love that. So thank you for your time. I wish we had more time to talk about more topics, but that will come. We will spend more time talking about EVP and how we can help other companies to bring EVPs to life. I'd like to thank you for your time and looking forward to talk to you next time.
Thank you, Ad. Thank you for your leadership on this issue.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.